I'm Glenn Winters. I work full-time for Virginia Opera. People always come up after these events and say, well, that was interesting. Now, what is it you do? This is what I do. I'm actually doing 9 of these lifelong learning programs on behalf of Virginia Opera. In the fall, it'll be 10, as well as various, church groups and Kiwanis or whatever. Introducing people to the art form of opera, or if they are already opera fans, kind of enriching their opera-going experience by means of sharing what I know about the art form of opera related to the productions that are coming up to the Carpenter Theater presented by my employers. So this session we're going to be talking about an American opera, Andre Previn's adaptation of the famous American drama A Streetcar Named Desire, and then Mozart's Marriage of Figaro. The goal of the class is that I assume that because I have a doctorate of music, been a professional musician for 40 plus years, and involved with opera. I've only been an opera professional for about a decade, or 9 years, but been involved with opera for quite a while, singing in the chorus, singing secondary roles. Well, let's all mute our cell phones. Singing principal roles, being a chorus master, being a prompter. That's fun. There's some opera houses, in case singers forget the words, you sit near the stage and you start every line of every character just so to jog their memories in a stage whisper. And I've coached opera. I've played keyboards in the pit at times, and I've composed several operas. So I've done pretty much everything except design the lighting and the sets and conduct the orchestra. I assume, I know, because I hear folks like you talk about opera, I know that I hear things in the music that go over your head. And that's regardless of how much you know about music and how you listen to it. Even those who really enjoy opera, I know that I'm listening a little more analytically than many opera lovers do. And for those who are new to it, it's sort of intimidating. You hear maybe a tune here that you like, a chorus there that makes you tap your toe, but otherwise it goes by in a blur. I want to show you how opera music functions. I want you to hear what I hear in these operas, and I want you to love them for the same reasons that I love them, which goes over and above opera's value as ear candy. And for too many of us, the role of music in our lives is that of what my daughter calls ear candy. Sounds pretty. Oh, I love that tune. I love that soprano's voice. I love that harmony in the orchestra. It's pretty. Oh, I like it. But then, after that comes a boring part, and I wait for the next pretty part that I really like. And then there are some operas where you don't find any pretty parts, the typical example would be somebody who just thinks Madame Butterfly is wonderful. It's so gorgeous from beginning to end. But there are other operas where, it's harsh, and I can't hear any tunes, and I don't like that kind. And I always compare music to food in that, there are only certain foods that a 4-year-old will eat. These generally include Honey Nut Cheerios, SpaghettiOs, and, string cheese. Don't ask them to eat anything else. Trouble is, as we grow older, in regard to food, as we mature, we discover that there are foods that can still bring us pleasure, even though it's not the same kind of pleasure as ice cream. The pumpernickel bread right out of the oven can be a source of pleasure, although it's distinct from the pleasure of ice cream. And little kids don't get that. They compare all foods to ice cream or Honey Nut Cheerios, and if it doesn't give them that pleasure, they reject it. My thesis is that most adults never get beyond the age of 4 when it comes to music. So I'm here to help you grow up musically a little bit. And the way you can do that, the way to get past whether it's pretty or not, is by understanding the function of opera music, which is one of the differences between opera music and, say, a Broadway musical, is that it has what I would call a literary function. Now we're going to start with an opera based on a Tennessee Williams classic drama. And as we'll be discussing in just a few minutes, A Streetcar Named Desire is an extremely literary play. It's full of literary allusions. It's full of allegory, symbolism. Everything means something. Everything is symbolic. Everything you see on the stage, every word they say, the names of the characters, it's all very symbolic and very literary. Well, that's different than a Neil Simon comedy, which is just to make you laugh or tug at your heartstrings. In a Broadway musical, the function of the music is to be effective, to be popular, to sell tickets at the box office. To sell tickets at the box office, to be toe-tapping, to bring a tear to your eye with the love scene and so forth. Now, do opera composers never think of these issues? Of course they do. However, beyond that, the great opera composers, Mozart, Verdi, Puccini, Wagner, Bizet, Benjamin Britten, and so forth, these guys invest their music with literary functions. That is, the music takes on the job of narrating the story, of defining and revealing the characters, of foreshadowing what will happen later, of having symbolism, of giving subtext. The orchestra can sometimes serve as the thought balloon over a character's head. Even when the character isn't saying anything, you'll know what they are thinking because of something you hear in the orchestra. And once you start acknowledging and recognizing and hearing those things, then opera music takes on a fascination that supersedes whether or not that was a pretty tune. Because you know what? You can get tired of pretty tunes. Just like if you have ice cream 3 meals a day, you'll get tired of the ice cream, even though ice cream is delicious. If you hear the same sweet little aria 5 times in a row, it's like, hey, enough. You know? So that's basically what we're trying to do with the class. I really feel like with this opera, with Andre Previn's Streetcar Named Desire, that I'm providing a public service in a way that I haven't ever before since I started working for the opera. And that's because you really need some help to know how to process what you're going to see and hear. You know, generally, opera companies like Virginia Opera, because opera is a tough way to make a living. It just doesn't make as much money as rock concerts and so forth. We generally do the big popular ones that everybody loves, and there aren't that many of those. We generally do, you know, the 3 big Puccini ones: Tosca, La Boheme, Madame Butterfly, Carmen, Barbara of Seville, Aida, La Traviata, Rigoletto. You know, there's a few others. But the thing is, I can talk about those, and those of you who are what I call the opera baby bears, those who don't know much about opera, then you get some insight there. And those who have heard Rigoletto all their lives, I hope that I bring some sort of, what would I say, some fresh insights, a fresh take. Gee, I never thought of it that way before, Glenn, that sort of thing. Fine. But with this opera, you are all starting from scratch. I'll probably regret this, but I'll give a crisp $100 bill to everyone in the class if there's any one of you who has seen a live performance of A Streetcar Named Desire before. Why do I get myself in these situations? I just have to say that. That was a hypothetical scenario.
And a hypothetical $100.
Yes, it was. It was all hypothetical. Right. like Lance Armstrong, you know, hypothetically.
I don't do.
Hysterical.
Now, were you referring to the opera or to the play? Because I think
Because
lots of
I
us
have
have
seen-
seen.
I'm referring to the opera.
Yeah.
I'm referring you to the opera. And it's not only a new opera, which is intimidating enough, but it's a contemporary opera that doesn't always have real pretty tunes. And you're going to sit there and you're going to be in a daze and you're going to come out and say, oh, why can't they just do Madame Butterfly? I love it so. I can help you. I can give you landmarks. I can help you understand why the music sounds the way it sounds, so that you say, okay, well, that makes sense. And I can give you little landmarks. Oh, here comes that one spot he was talking about. Something to anticipate and look forward to and say, ah. And there are several of those. It's like crossing a rapids, a churning, boiling river. I can give you little stepping stones that you can leap from one to the other and safely get to the other side. And you'll walk out of the theater after, because 3 hours is a long time to sit and listen to contemporary music by a living composer. That is something you're not accustomed to. And you're not accustomed to this. Andre Previn is a familiar figure. He sort of inherited the mantle of Leonard Bernstein, who, because Bernstein was a great orchestra conductor, a Broadway composer, a classical composer, a lecturer, also he wore many hats. Well, that's what Andre Previn does. Andre Previn is not the greatest living composer, not the greatest living conductor, not the greatest living anything really, but he's been wonderful at just about everything you can do. He's an award-winning, distinguished film score composer, one of our great jazz musicians, a fine classical pianist. He's been music director of several important orchestras, like the Pittsburgh Symphony, records all the classical repertoire as a conductor, and a very prolific composer, but his classical composition is not as familiar as the other things you've seen him do. This opera, based on, again, let's do a little survey. How many people have seen a live staged theatrical done by real breathing actors or in front of you of the play, A Streetcar Named Desire? How many people have seen the Marlon Brando film? How many people have seen the Marlon Brando film within 20 years' time? Okay. Did you see it preparing for this class, or just, no?
It was on public TV.
Public TV, okay. We do need to, look, this is not just a great American play, it's one of the great dramas in theater. And the opera is based not on the film, it's based on the play. There are differences between them. But nevertheless, the film is so iconic, and it has 3 of the original stage actors, plus the stage director also directed the film, Elia Kazan, that we really need to talk about Tennessee Williams' drama. You need to really have a good handle on that and understand all the aspects of that. Your timeline is that the Broadway play opened in 1947, was an immediate smash hit. It was a sensation, largely because of the acting style of Marlon Brando in the role of Stanley Kowalski, who was much more primal and raw and unpolished and a force of nature than male actors on the stage had been in America prior to that. It's set in New Orleans. Up here, I've got a really crappy little map of New Orleans on the left side of that board back there. Kind of, just to give you an idea, going from left to right, on the far side of the tall buildings of downtown is the Garden District, where you have Loyola University and a lot of beautiful homes, and it's fun to take the streetcar down into the Garden District and, ooh, look at that fancy house, ooh, look at that fancy house. Kind of like the West End of Richmond, I guess. Then you have downtown. My wife and I went to New Orleans for Christmas for a week in 2010. My hotel You see where my hotel is marked? That big blob there that the hotel is in the corner of is the French Quarter. So from the roof garden of my hotel, if you look to the left, you saw this. You saw the downtown of New Orleans, which has rebounded nicely from Katrina. Then if you look to the right, from the same rooftop garden, there is the French Quarter sprawling out, and in the far distance there you can see the Mississippi River. So you take a riverboat cruise that starts downtown about here. You get on the riverboat with the downtown in the background. You sail to your right as you look at the screen, and you get to the French Quarter, which here you're seeing it from the riverboat. Behind me are some buildings of the French Quarter where all the tourists go, Café du Monde, beignets out the wazoo. You keep going to the right and you get to a fairly disreputable section where tourists don't go. There's a lot of sort of not really very glamorous stuff going on here. It's kind of run down. There's just a lot of, commercial fishing docks and stuff. Not very attractive. And here's another view of all of that. It doesn't look too touristy, does it? That's the section where you would find what in the Cajun French was called Rue Désirée, Desire Street. There is a Desire Street, and there was a streetcar that rattled up and down Desire Street. Now you're a poet, you're living in New Orleans, and there's a Desire Street. How are you gonna leave that alone? You gotta, baby, you gotta make some hay out of that, absolutely. In fact, all of the, Blanche's first line, to give you an idea of how literary this play is. So you've got Blanche Dubois. Oh, let's talk about something else, about what to expect. And those of you who have seen all of this fairly recently, either the play or the film or both, you're going to understand that, we just did Die Fledermaus back in November. Die Fledermaus is a romp. There are all sorts of operas. It's amazing the variety that you find. They all fit under the umbrella of opera, but the same is true of films. Here's 3 movies: The Hangover, Citizen Kane, Psycho. A silly comedy showing people misbehaving. Well, that was Die Fledermaus. A comic romp full of bad behavior that we laugh at because we recognize the bad behavior that, we or our children or whatever, Citizen Kane, something lofty and compelling and literary. Psycho, something horrifying, something gripping on the edge of the seat. And what you need to understand, the contrast from Die Fledermaus to A Streetcar Named Desire. People have a preconceived notion of what the experience of going to an opera will be. The preconceived notion tends to be that there will be beautiful music sung by beautiful voices, and if it's a comedy, it will show wily servants outwitting stupid masters, or if it's a drama, it'll be a sweet love story in which there's a love triangle, and if it's a happy ending, the tenor gets the girl, and if it's a sad ending, the baritone kills the tenor, and nobody gets the girl, and the girl dies. That's fine. But the experience of going to A Streetcar Named Desire is going to deliver what we in drama call catharsis. Catharsis means purging. So my little witticism is that going from Die Fledermaus, in which you're kind of binging on, champagne and jokes and dancing and waltzes, to Streetcar, where you have this purging catharsis. It's like we're giving you a musical eating disorder, basically, going from one to the other. A catharsis has 3 meanings. It has a medical meaning, a psychological meaning, and an artistic meaning. The medical meaning, it's like when I have a little beagle named Gilda, and when my daughter was making a French Christmas cake, the bûche de Noël, chocolate cake for her class, Gilda snuck up when our backs were turned and ate the whole thing. Well, chocolate is poisonous to dogs. So we called up the vet and he said, get the puppy on her back, pry her jaws open, and pour peroxide down her gullet, and keep doing it until she has finally barfed up all the bûche de Noël. A more miserable, remorseful dog you never saw. Not that she wouldn't have done the same thing 5 minutes later, but at the time, she said, I'm so sorry. That was catharsis. That was purging the bad stuff, getting the bad stuff out. This was adopted by psychology. Mary, it turns out that you have repressed anger because when you were 6 months old, your mother stuffed you in a golf cart all day long so that she could drink martinis. And you don't know why you're so angry. Sigmund Freud, the seventh, took you into therapy and brought out, under whatever hypnosis or whatever, he brought out these bad memories that you had really forgotten. That's a catharsis. And the idea is that when you realize what it is that you've been holding in the back of your mind and you say, oh, that's it, then you can sort of deal with it and move on and be happy. And she looks much happier now, doesn't she? I'm so glad that worked out for you. And then Aristotle was the first person to apply catharsis to the arts. And it's what was the big deal about Greek drama, that when you watch people, when you watch characters in a fictional play suffer adversity, if it's done with skill and artistry, you empathize with them. You feel like it's happening to you. Which is why in Psycho, when the guy is going down in the basement of the house, you get all tense. Why? It's not happening to you, but you feel like it is. You're just as tense. And then the bad stuff happens and all of that, and you're shocked and you scream and you're terrified. But then when you are leaving the movie theater, you realize, oh wait, it was just a story. I'm alive. It's like when you wake up from a bad dream and you realize, oh, I wasn't really walking down, 3 Chopped Road in my underwear, how people pointed and laughed at me. It was just a dream. And then you're, and that's that wonderful life-affirming, there's a life-affirming aspect of vicariously experiencing suffering and pain and adversity. And of course, that's what you get in spades in Streetcar. You watch a woman destroy herself and be destroyed by those around her gradually. Her mental stability erodes and she kind of unravels like a cheap sweater in front of our eyes until finally she has to go to an asylum where we suspect that she's not going to survive very long. That's Blanche Dubois. It's not a mystery. The first moment Blanche opens her mouth, her very first lines, which in the movie I think are the first lines of the script. She says, she's come to visit her sister Stella, who's living in a rundown bad neighborhood of New Orleans with her husband Stanley Kowalski. And she's come there by train and she's had these complicated directions trying to find Stella's house. And that's her first line. She finds the upstairs neighbor Eunice and she says, they told me to take a streetcar named Desire to transfer onto one called Cemeteries, ride a few blocks and get off at Elysian Fields. Well, once again, there really is a neighborhood called Elysian Fields in New Orleans. And this is where we begin the literary allusions, because this is an allusion to Greek mythology. Blanche's line that I just quoted tells you her whole odyssey, her entire journey, what's going to happen. There's no mystery here. She's coming to her doom. She's not going to make it. Because the Streetcar Named Desire, well, Tennessee Williams is telling us desire leads to cemeteries. Okay. Human desire leads to death. And then what is the Elysian? What were the Elysian fields? Any Greek mythology students? The Elysian fields in Greek mythology correspond to Valhalla in Norse mythology, where the gods and heroic mortals go after their earthly adventures are concluded. The mythological version of paradise. It's always depicted as a lovely meadow, where the spirits of these gods and certain mortals have their rest from their tribulations on earth during their earthly lives. So you see what we're being told about Blanche de Bois. Desire has and Blanche, as we'll come to find out, she has a sordid sexual history. She has become a wanton trollop. She tries to hide this, but the truth comes out. However, that's not the desire for her. What she's really desiring is human contact with people that can still find her to be a worthwhile, lovable human being. Feeling safe. She hasn't felt safe for a long time because she's endured so much. She wants to find somebody who will take care of her. And she wants to find some stability. She's in a storm-tossed sea, she's looking for a life raft. That's what she desires. Now with her sister Stella, it's pretty much just the physical lust that she has for her husband Stanley. Their relationship is totally driven by their physical need for one another. And there are other literary allusions to be aware of, a couple to Shakespeare. Throughout, if you know Romeo and Juliet, there will be some lines that are familiar where Romeo says, "What light through yonder window breaks is the east, and Juliet is the sun." And something like she's torches burning brightly. Every page of Romeo and Juliet, the dominant image is light. Shakespeare has line after line, dozens of lines about light, sunlight, starlight, bright lights. And this is something, there's a tip of the cap by Tennessee Williams, because all through Streetcar, there are lots of references to light. One of the characters, Midge, that Blanche is trying to get to marry her, notices that she never wants to go out in the daytime with him, only at night. And she turn that light off. She puts paper lanterns over light bulbs so it won't be so glaring. She has an aversion to light, which is of course symbolic. Why does she not want to be seen in bright light? Because she feels like her sordid past, her secrets the people will be able to see them, that they'll be able to see, that she feels like those lights are an X-ray, that people will see how her beauty has faded, she's not young and pretty anymore. And but it's really not her outside looks that she's concerned with, it's her inward dirtiness. And that brings us to another literary allusion. In Macbeth, when Lady Macbeth goes noo-noo, and she's wandering her castle, muttering to herself, the doctor watching her notices that she keeps trying to scrub her hands as if she's washing her hands, and Lady Macbeth says, "Out, out, damn spot," trying to erase the stain of her guilt over the horrible murders that they've committed. And all through Streetcar, Stanley is constantly banging on the bathroom door, "Hey, Blanche, get out of there, come on," because she's always taking these long, hot baths. And for the same reason as Lady Macbeth, and this would be very deliberate on the playwright's part, it's an allusion to Macbeth. She's trying to wash away her soiled, past. And then finally, Gone with the Wind. You'll see, we're going to watch some clips from the movie. You'll see there's one which is a very clear reference to Gone with the Wind, because both are about the death of the old, gracious, aristocratic Old South. That it's gone. Gone with the Wind. Again, this is a theme that Tennessee Williams realizes he's sharing with Margaret Mitchell. And so he has a scene in there that really brings that home in many ways. When San Francisco Opera, so the film was in 1951, the film had 3 of the original actors. They felt that Jessica Tandy, who had played Blanche on Broadway, was not enough of a box office attraction, not glamorous enough, so they let Vivian Leigh do the role. Vivian Leigh had been playing Blanche on stage in London in a production directed by her husband, Laurence Olivier. And, Tennessee Williams dies in 1983. And from that point on, I noticed that it's as if everybody woke up and said, oh, he's dead. Oh, gosh, that was really a great play. Wow. And that movie, that was so, wow, I sort of forgot about that. And all of a sudden, you start to see revivals. A revival on Broadway, and suddenly on TV, they're doing TV movies of versions of the play with what's her name, Anne Margaret played Blanche, Jessica Lange played Blanche, there have been several. And this all kind of was part of a crescendo leading up to San Francisco Opera commissioning Andre Previn to adapt it into an opera, which made its debut in 1998. An interesting thing, and here I want you to give me your ideas. There was a stipulation made by the estate of Tennessee Williams, because San Francisco Opera had to get permission from the playwright's estate to use this material, still under copyright. And they said, all right, you can do it. Now, they said, we understand, here's the conditions. We understand you'll have to cut a lot of the play. So that's fine, but don't change the lines. Whatever you use has to be just as in the original. So don't add things that weren't there and don't reword it, but we understand you have to cut it. Now, for those of you who don't know a lot about opera, well, operas have librettos. They're like, when you read a libretto, it's like reading a play. And if this is such a great play, if it's such an exalted masterpiece, then why would they have to cut anything? Why couldn't you just take Tennessee Williams' play and set it to music? Why did the estate understand that large parts of it would have to be cut? What's the reason?
Too much descriptive lines or something?
Yeah. When you listen to this film, you'll notice that Marlon Brando has, a particular style of acting. Well, Blanche, I don't know what you're used to, but here in Louisiana, that's not how we do things, okay? Can you sing like that? No. It takes longer to sing words than to say them. And you have an orchestra, which, as I say, is taking part of the drama. The orchestra becomes one of the principal players in the drama. Blanche says something, and the orchestra will play something that sort of goes, oh, really? The orchestra is like the Greek chorus sometimes, making commentary on it. That's something that you can add because you're not changing the words. So if you just took the play script and set it to music, you would have a 9-hour opera. So you have to boil it down to the essential parts, and it still winds up being a 3-hour opera. So let us, for the next 45 minutes or so, what I want to do is, but can we take a vote? If we must, if you really, can't last 2 hours without Depends or something, I understand. Do we insist, do we have to, can we do without the break, or do you really need the break?
Do without. You can deal with that.
Do without.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I want to show you 2 scenes from the film. 2 scenes from the film. Because then we'll be able to see what happens when they're treated musically, kind of compare and contrast. I also want to show you a couple of clips from a documentary about the making of the opera, which you will find very helpful. And by the way, on February 27th, the last Thursday in February, at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, I will be hosting a showing of the complete documentary about the making of the opera. At 7 or 7:30, you can check with the calendar of the museum. There on the boulevard, the Fine Arts Museum.
The 28th is the
28th.
28th, very well.
February 28th.
Right. So we can't see the whole thing today. I'll show you some of the pertinent parts, you know, maybe 15 minutes worth, including a very interesting short interview with Tennessee Williams, where he talks about why he wrote the play, what he had in mind. That will kind of be very helpful for you in getting the right mindset for seeing the opera. And then, following that, I'll do a little analysis of the music, show you how the music works, what he's trying to do. So,
Dr. Winters, how many times has this actually been performed throughout the United States?
Many times. Well, here's one last comment to make before we start the videos. I say opera. What country first comes to mind? Italy. As it should, because that's where opera was invented. In 1597, if you want to know, by a bunch of Florentine fellows, artists, writers, musicians, who were trying to actually recreate Greek drama. They were curious, intellectually curious. What was Greek drama probably like in performance? They weren't trying to invent opera. They were trying to recreate Greek drama. They wound up inventing opera. And from then until about 1926, 27, can't remember, despite the fact that these other, you know, it's like, yes, there were other countries that wrote operas, but come on. It's like Japan plays baseball, but come on, baseball is American. Yeah, they have opera in Germany, but come on, opera's Italian. Well, the funny thing is that was true until Puccini died in the late 1920s. From that time onward, there have been no significant Italian opera composers. They have dropped it. They don't do it no more. You know? Again, it's sort of like a good analogy with baseball. Baseball has become more Latino. Not that many American youngsters want to play baseball anymore. They want to play NBA and NFL. But you are living in the golden age of American opera. Your country, the United States of America, has become by far the leading producer of opera. We are keeping the great tradition of opera going, not Italy. These names up in the upper right-hand corner are living American composers who have written operas that get performed. William Bolcom, Philip Glass, Jay Kagi, Ricky Ian Gordon. We did one of his a couple of seasons ago. Tobias Picker, Rufus Wainwright. You may not have heard of them, but their operas are being performed all over the country. And Streetcar Named Desire, it was sort of calculated to avoid failure because it had 3 brand names: Tennessee Williams, Andre Previn, and Renee Fleming, the great soprano for whom the role Blanche was created. As long as you got those 3 going, it's going to get performed. It has been performed many, many times. And in fact, Chicago Lyric Opera and Carnegie Hall will both be doing it with Renee Fleming yet this season. And by the way, to show you that with our new artistic administration of Virginia Opera, we're getting a higher caliber of artists than we used to. The guys playing Stanley and Mitch in our production will be later reprising those roles with Renee Fleming at Chicago Lyric Opera. So you're not getting the wet behind the ears kids just out of college that at one time we mostly had.
Do you have dates for that?
Go to our website, vaopera.org. It's hard for me to remember all the dates.
I've got it here, Richmond, March 8th and 10th. The streetcar?
Yeah.
March 8th and 10th.
When do you want these shades drawn?
Well, we've got an issue of taping going on. I could, let's just see if it's good enough. You know, this, I think you can get the idea, basically. The scene you're going to see. Blanche does represent a woman who is clinging to the past of the South. The, you know, the gracious Southern belle who manipulates men, who is put on a pedestal and treated like a, you know, a princess. And the aristocratic Southern boys, and the fine plantations, and the charm, and so forth. Stanley Kowalski represents the end of all of that, of a new kind of industrialized South that doesn't care about mint juleps and, you know, glasses of iced tea and polo matches. And so the conflict between them is at the heart of this drama. It's T-Rex versus King Kong. And so the scenes between them are the crux of this drama. Now, you're going to see the first skirmish between them. And Stanley has no use for Blanche. Blanche, one of the things that happened to her is that their old home, their plantation childhood home in Mississippi, Belle Reve, which she pronounces Belle Reve, was lost. She couldn't hang on to it. It was, foreclosed. What does Belle Reve mean in French?
Beautiful river.
Beautiful dream.
Dream.
This is symbolic. The Old South, that way of life, is now just a beautiful dream. And Stanley believes that Blanche has swindled he and his wife Stella, that she sold it and made a lot of money, and just claims that it was lost, and that she's going to spend, that she got $50,000 and they're getting nothing. So he's trying to find out what's going on here. By the way, their names are symbolic. What does Blanche mean?
White.
What does white stand for?
Purity.
Which is the facade that she wants to present. Oh, I'm the respectable, ladylike, the Southern belle, butter wouldn't melt in my mouth, I don't use harsh language. But Dubois means
The woods.
the woods. What happens in the woods? Secret things, dark things, wolves and bears and shadows and darkness. So that this is the duality of Blanche, that she's hiding things, and this purity business is a facade. So here we have the first skirmish between these two characters.
You might want to pull down those shades.
I'm going to ask a favor of you in a moment.
Well, what's that going to be, I wonder?
Some buttons in there. You may add it. How do I look?
You look okay.
No, thanks. No, the buttons.
Well, I can't do no more.
You're ready with your big clumsy fingers. May I have a dragon here, say?
Yeah, it won't be so.
Why, thank you. It looks like my trunk has exploded.
Me and Stella was helping you unpack.
You certainly did a fast and thorough job of it.
Well, it certainly looks like you raided some stylish shops in Paris, Blanche.
Clothes and my passion.
How much did it cost to restrain a flirt like that?
Why, these were tributes from an admirer of mine.
He must have a lot of admiration.
Well, my youth, I excited some admiration for letting me know. Would you think it possible that I was once considered to be attractive?
He looks okay.
I was fishing for compliments, Danny.
I don't go in for that stuff.
Stuff.
Compliments to women about their looks. I never met a dame yet didn't know she was good looking or not without being told. And there's some of them that give themselves credit for more than they've got. I once went out with a dame who told me I'm the glamorous type. She says, I am the glamorous type. I said, so what?
And what did she say then?
She didn't say nothing. I shut up like a clown.
Did it end the romance?
Well, it ended the conversation, that was all. There's some men, Blanche, that I took in by this Hollywood glamour stuff, and there's some men that just aren't.
I'm sure you belong in the second category.
That's right.
I cannot imagine any witch of a woman casting a spell over you.
That's right.
You're simple, straightforward, and honest. A little bit on the primitive side, I should think. The way to see a woman would have
But
to...
you have to lay her cards on the table.
Well, I never did get it for wishy-washy people. That was why when you walked in here last night, I said to myself, our sister has married a man. Of course, that was all I could tell
Well,
about.
how about cutting a rebar?
Stanley! Stanley, you come on outside with me and let Blanche finish dressing. Finish dressing, honey. Well, you come on out
Sister
here.
and I having a little talk.
Do me a favor. Run to the drugstore and get me a lemon coke with plenty of chipped ice. Will you do that for me, sweetie? Please. Poor little thing was out there listening to us. And now I have an idea she doesn't understand you as well as I do. All right, now, Mr. Kowalski, let us proceed without any more digression. I'm ready to answer all questions. I have nothing to hide. What is it?
In the state of Louisiana, we got here what's known as the Napoleonic Code. According to which that what belongs to the wife belongs to the husband also, and vice versa.
My, but you have an impressive judicial age.
You know, if I didn't know that you was my wife's sister, I would get ideas about you.
To the what?
Don't play so dumb, you know what.
All right. Cards on the table. I know I fib a good deal. After all, a woman's charm is 50% illusion. But when a thing is important, I tell the truth. And this is the truth. I never cheated my sister, or you, or anyone else on earth as long as I lived.
Well, where are the papers in your trunk?
Everything I own is in that trunk. What are you thinking of? What's in the back of that little boy's mind of yours? Let me do that, it'll be faster and simpler. I keep my papers mostly in this tin box.
What are those underneath?
Some love letters, yellowing with antiquity, all from one boy. Give them back to me!
Have a look at these.
Put your hands in
That stuff.
Oh, did you touch them? I'll burn them.
What are they?
Poem, the dead boy wrote. I hurt him the way that you would like to hurt me, but you can't. I'm not young and vulnerable anymore, but my young husband was, and I... Never mind about that, just give them back to me.
What do you mean by saying you have to burn them up?
I'm sorry. I must have lost my head for a moment. Everyone has something they won't let others touch because of their intimate nature. Ambler and Ambler. Crabtree. More Ambler and Ambler.
Well, what's Ambler and Ambler?
Firm that made loans on the place.
Well, then it was lost on a mortgage.
That must have been what happened.
I don't want no ifs, ands, or buts. Now, what's the rest of them papers?
There are thousands of papers stretching back over hundreds of years affecting Belle Reeve. Piece by piece, our incommodant grandfathers exchanged the land for their epic debauches, to put it mildly.
That's an
Finally,
important
all that
line.
was left, and Stella can verify that, was the house itself, and about 20 acres of ground, including a graveyard, to which now all but Stella and I have retreated. Here they are. All of them. All papers. I hereby endow you with them. Take them, peruse them, commit them to memory even. And it's wonderfully fitting that Belle Reeve should finally be this bunch of old papers in your big, capable hands. I wonder if Stella's come back with my laptop.
I got a lawyer acquaintance. We'll study this out.
Present them to him with a box of aspirin.
Flash, under the Napoleonic Code, a man has got to take an interest in his wife's affairs.
By which we understand that while he's going to win the war, he has lost this battle. He was hoping that there would be one piece of paper that says, received by Blanche Dubois, $100,000 for Belle Reeve. Instead, he's got all these papers, you know, he's a factory worker. He's not what you call an intellectual. It's all over his head, and he knows it. And this is not what he bargained for. So he's saying, well, I've got a lawyer friend. He'll look at these. And, I was just trying to look out for my wife's affair. He understands he's lost. We're not going to hear about Belle Reeve anymore. The business, when she was complaining about having lost the property due to the epic debaucheries of their ancestors or whatever. I think in the stage play she says the epic fornications. This is Tennessee Williams giving his commentary on what happened to the Old South. The corruption. That in any culture or society, civilization, that it will eventually fall because corruption comes. That's what she is speaking for Tennessee Williams there, I believe. One way she sort of defeated him there was by using the weapons that she has always used to manipulate and control men, which is what? Sex. Oh, Stanley, I'm not buttoned up in the back. Would you get these buttons? Now, this is not, this is 75 years ago. A woman, that's her brother-in-law, see her when she's not fully dressed. Whoa. That's why he says, I'd get ideas about you if I didn't know better. And notice, when he couldn't do the button, she said, oh, you men with your big fingers. Here's a tip, she's not talking about fingers. Okay? And spraying perfume and so forth. Funny thing is, it didn't work on him exactly the way it worked on all the high school boys back in Laurel, Mississippi. However, it's still, and then when she was falling to pieces over all those letters were what? From her husband that she married, with childhood sweethearts. They got married when they were young and foolish at age 16. And you know, all of Tennessee Williams' dramas are in large measure autobiographical. Blanche, like many of his heroines, is based on, who knows? Partially based on his Tennessee Williams' sister, Rose, who wound up mentally unstable and had to be committed to an asylum for the rest of her life. And then, what was the sad, tragic part of? Well, you know, you don't know if you only see the film because censors made them cut out all the graphic talk. But in the stage play, we find out what the deal was with Alan Gray. Oh, his name is Gray, her husband, which is that he was homosexual. Not long after they were married, they were out at a party, and she came upon him in a little room where he was engaging in a homosexual act with an older man. She was very disgusted, and later that night, in front of her, he blew his brains out, and that's part of her sordid past that she came. People surmise, why did she turn so sexually promiscuous? She's trying to recapture that relationship. She has a thing for young boys, high school boys, and young soldiers. Either she's trying to rekindle what, you know, have that again that she had for that young boy, or she's trying to assuage her guilt, turn into that young boy and explore what was his attraction to men and try to have all these sexual relations with all these men. Who knows? She's a hot mess. But of course, Tennessee Williams was flagrantly, openly homosexual as well, living in New Orleans, at least after a certain... You read his memoirs, it's like, you can't read it all in one sitting. I can take 20 pages or so at a time because it is an unrelieved string of sexual escapades that just like, Now, the famous iconic moments that made Marlon Brando a star and gave fodder for all sorts of impersonators and impressionists, when he is standing outside the apartment yelling at his wife Stella at the top of his lungs, which brings up a point. You're the composer, and you've got this scene that you're about to see, yelling Stella at the top of his lungs. What are you going to do for your baritone portraying Stanley? You going to have to sing that? Stella, Stella. No matter how you have him sing it, the audience is going to do exactly what you just did. You don't want people laughing at the moment like that. So, no, he's going to shout it at the top of his lungs as well, as you'll hear in the second hour. So let me find this other, this scene. We're going to see the scene where there's a poker game in which you have the absolute contrast between the ultra-femininity of Blanche and what could be more kind of gorilla-like masculine. What do men do at poker games? They scratch, they belch, they curse, they, whatever. They do all the yucky boy things, So it's kind of in Blanche's face. There's one fellow, one of Stanley's poker buddies, last name Mitchell, everybody calls him Mitch, who thinks Blanche is kind of pretty and kind of smiles at her. And she, Blanche, again, is looking for a piece of driftwood in a storm-tossed sea to hang on to cling to survive. He'll do. So she immediately starts seducing him using every trick in her book, trying to attach herself to Mitch like a barnacle to the bottom of a fishing boat. And at first he's quite taken in by it. You'll see the scene where, much to Stanley's annoyance, she keeps turning on the radio to play dance music so she and Mitch can dance, and she's willing to have him turn on the light because she's put a paper lantern over it that she bought in the French Quarter. And this leads to tempers and to a very famous scene. And be thinking about the end of this scene and what the reference is to Gone with the Wind. I think you'll probably catch it if you know that movie as well. Let's see. That's what I want to hear. It's very awkward that you can't see what you're clicking when you're clicking. Tearing up the place. Tell me when it gets to number 9.
Go up, back.
What?
Yeah.
Two more.
Oh, over 2, okay. That's it?
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry. Oh, excuse me.
Have you heard it?
Oh, yes. Yes, I have.
This is the great Carl
Turn on the
Malden.
radio. Turn on the light above now. Oh, we've met in the shadow.
Three bars, mustache. Straight, I got you.
Dad! Dad, what are you doing? Drunk animal thing, you get out!
Hey!
Get out!
Hey!
You get out! You come on up to my place, honey. This isn't any hurt you do.
Stella? Honey, where are you? Stella? Hey, baby.
Look, you can sleep over here, Stella, and Blanche can have Steve's place. He ain't coming home tonight if he knows what's good for him, yeah? Look, she ain't coming down, and she ain't gonna talk to you neither, so you might just as well not call her.
Hey, Stella!
You put that howling down there and go to bed.
Jonas, I want my clothes down here.
You shut up. You gotta get the law.
Hey,
You
Stella!
beat on a woman and then call her back, cause she ain't gonna come. You're gonna have a baby.
Listen,
I'll say haul you in and turn the fire.
Jonas, I want my clothes down here.
You stink.
Hey, Stella! Hey, Stella!
I wouldn't mix in this.
estrogen meet testosterone.
Who is the actress?
Kim Hunter also played the role on Broadway.
You don't have to leave me, baby.
Again, just a tip, they're not going in there to play Parcheesi the rest of the night. What is the Gone with the Wind reference? What scene am I thinking of?
Staircase scene.
Yeah, which this is sort of, maybe deliberately the upside down version, instead of Rhett going up the staircase with Scarlett in his arms, here's Stella coming down the staircase, but we understand that they're going to go in and have, just as Rhett and Scarlett did, they're going to have an evening of especially intense, not to say violent, lovemaking. And what was the following scene in Gone with the Wind? What did we see afterwards? Scarlett doing what?
Smiling and
Lolling on the bed, stretching out luxuriously, humming a little tune, you know, and just like the cat that licked up all the cream. That same scene comes in Streetcar, where the next morning Stella is lolling on the bed. So this is obvious. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Tennessee Williams saying, yes, you know, there are several similarities here between these characters and the characters in Gone with the Wind and the theme of the Old South disappearing. So this is my tip of the cap to Margaret Mitchell, you know. And as you will see later in this class, Andre Previn, in case it doesn't register, he uses a musical device to drive home the similarity. And no, it's not the Tara theme. It would have been under copyright. Again, the little radio, everything, you know, Chekhov, the great playwright Chekhov who wrote Uncle Vanya and the Three Sisters and the Cherry Orchard, had a theory about drama, that every detail, it was active detail, every detail had to mean something and not just be there to make it more colorful. He said if there's a gun on a table in Act 1, that gun has to be fired in Act 3, or else why is it there? This is something that's very true in Streetcar as well, which is what I mean when I mean literary. In the stage directions for that little radio that he throws through the window, it says that he takes the little white radio. Her name is Blanche. So he's really destroying, it's foreshadowing. He's destroying Blanche when he destroys that white radio that she wanted to play. And as a matter of fact, when Stella is lolling in bed the next day, she's wearing red pajamas. Red symbolizes, well, maybe the opposite of white.
White.
You know. And when Stanley sexually assaults Stella, which is the final act of violence that pushes her over into La La Land, he puts on red silk pajamas. And you know, at a certain critical point in the film, I don't know if this happens in the stage play, there's a quick, you know, we have the scene of the street outside the apartment, and there's all sorts, you know, cars coming and going. A hot dog vendor comes by with a little push cart of hot dogs selling his wares. He's got one line, and we never see him again. Get your red hots! That's there for a reason. It's not like, oh, it's so true to life to New Orleans. I remember a push cart. No. He's there, symbolizing that right now the action is being driven by sex. This is how the writing works in this play. It's very ingenious. Right now, don't have time to see the rest of it. Probably be against the law for me to show the whole thing anyway. Virginia Opera tried to get permission to show the entire film, but couldn't get it. Okay, where is the open credit button? Oh, it worked. I love it when it works. Hate it when things don't work, love it when they work. All right, now, this interview with Tennessee Williams, which is the first thing we'll see, was obviously made in the 1970s. He's older. He was kind of a nice-looking man, but he's kind of looking a little bit worse for the wear. And just the nature of the look of the video and what he's wearing, it looks highly 1970s. He died in 1983. You know, he had a rough life. His main male partner of many years died in maybe the 60s, I think, and from then on he descended into an abysmal lifestyle of alcohol and drugs. When he died, he was alone in a hotel room surrounded by empty wine bottles, and he had choked to death on the cap of a pill bottle. And besides what the very interesting insights he's giving in this interview, listen to his speech pattern. My question to you is, how lit was he in this interview? You know, if you've ever been around a drunk person who's trying to appear sober, they have a way of very carefully articulating their words.
That was well done.
Yes, thank you. Oh, I'm good at it. Yeah. Okay, tell me when I get to number 8. Yep.
I started Streetcar under the title Blanche's Chair in the Moon. And the only idea I had was of a young woman waiting for a beau who doesn't arrive, you know? She's sitting in the chair with the moon coming in on, waiting for him to arrive. That's all I had to begin with. And why did I write? I knew had the life that I was living. I needed to create an imaginary life in an imaginary world, and, you know, imaginary character. Because I found life unsatisfactory. To have had all the blinding, exciting experiences of being alive from moment to moment, and have it suddenly stop in total oblivion. That's tragic. We have to live with that tragedy, confronting us always.
On the right is the guy who's the CEO of San Francisco Opera, who commissioned this work.
It's actually graphic proof of the work. I can't believe it. It's been absolutely
Actually, it started about 2 years ago when I had a call from another opera company, a European one, and they wanted to know whether I'd be interested in writing an opera, and I said completely truthfully, it had never occurred to me. And they said, well, we'll send you the proposed story from which a libretto will come.
Right away we cast it and we'll start working.
They sent it to me, and I read it carefully because I was flattered, and I called back with an extremely unmusical or certainly inartistic comment. I said, listen, I can't do this one because I can't write an opera where everybody in it is wearing a toga. I said, I can't identify with those people with the sandals and all that. I said, I can't do it. Of course, they wrote me off as a complete Philistine, you know, and that was that. And I promptly forgot all about it.
The only thing it does is so that when you
And then Lotfi Mansuri, who was the intendant of the San Francisco Opera, he called me and he said, would you consider writing an opera for us? I said, well, on what? And I was very hesitant. And he said, Streetcar Named Desire. And I said, yes. I said, I'll make life very simple for you. You don't have to convince me. Yes, absolutely. That's an old, my misspent youth. I was a master. Just. Why should I be allowed to take one of the great plays of the 20th century and turn it into an opera? It's a really daunting idea. But I've more or less gambled all my life with things, and with artistic things, and some have worked out, some haven't, but I've never been sorry I did it, no.
Well, I think my perspective is just to hear everybody and see what the choices are.
Okay, right.
This was my dream about 20 years. I had seen this play when I was a student at UCLA, and then of course saw the film, and I had such a crush on Vivian Leigh. And I always thought that Blanche is an absolutely gorgeous character for an opera. So I started in Canada, late 70s, trying to explore the possibility of turning it into an opera. And we came up with Andre's name, because it needed an American composer. Andre I'd admired for years, of course, all his Hollywood stuff. And so I knew his soundtrack from Elmer Gantry, and I loved his language. I loved his musical language. Very, very dramatic, very, how would you say it, music theater piece, and American, also very American. So then somebody said, oh, Andre, he would never do it, and he doesn't have the time, or you out of your mind. I said, let's just ask. And so we asked his agent, and the agent said, well, he doesn't have time, he's getting, I said, let's ask. So, unfortunately for me, the minute they asked Andre right away said yes.
Really? Hello, how do you meet you?
You remember Patrick.
Hey! I enjoy composing very much, and I'm always composing something. I have no delusions about it, and I don't ever give it a thought whether things will be played years and years from now. I just want them to be played next Wednesday. I've set myself deadlines. When I mentioned them, Lotfi said, you don't have to stick to that. I said, oh, yeah, no, I don't want you to do that. I want you to threaten me, because I figure I will hand in Act 2 by November 1, 97. And that will then give it 10 months before the premiere, which is about right. They want to do workshops, and there's changes, additions. I'm very good about deadlines, because you have to have it ready. And the only thing was, when you do films, you have to have it ready, whether you can think of anything to write or not. And I'm trying very hard not to fall back on that one. Did you ever see that film on how Menotti staged something in Spoleto? There was one wonderful one, it was Pelias. And he ran up on the stage and he had this whole big discussion. And as he came down the aisle, and he was completely unaware that they were filming.
Yes, I'm sure that's very interesting, but I'm going to skip forward to the last chapter, in which you'll see, here's some more interviews with folks, but also watch staging rehearsals, which for those of you who haven't been around, usually the public doesn't get to watch these kind of staging rehearsals, because it's like, watching the New England Patriots practice, it's closed, everybody can't come and watch there because secret stuff that's none of your business happens that they don't want getting around. But you get to watch the stage director, Colin Graham, which is kind of interesting. It'll show you a little bit, an insight. I mean, what does the stage director do in an opera? Well, people understand that he's kind of the traffic cop. It's like, Doug, I want you to come in from the door over there, and after 6 bars of music, cross over to where the video camera is. All right, and then Joyce, I want you to come in from another door that I'm going to build over here, and just stand in the corner here, and then chorus, you come in, tell everybody when to come in and where to stand. Is that all he does? No. He's going to help these actors with line readings, which is very interesting, because really, it's different than in the regular theater. In the regular theater, when you have dialogue, there's a million ways that you can say those lines. Suppose we had a line like, wait a minute, that was you that whole time? You've got to be kidding, I had no idea. How many ways different can I say that? Wait a minute, that was you that whole time? I had no idea. You've got to be kidding. Wait a minute. That was you that whole time? I had no idea. You've got to be kidding. Could I come up with 100 ways of pacing that line and so forth? I could. Opera is different. Opera, a lot of those choices are taken out of your hands. And why is that? Who's in charge of that? The composer. The words are set to music, which has rhythm. Wait a minute, was that you that whole time? You've got to be kidding. I had no idea. You can't change that rhythm. However, you can inflect it differently. And even though the pacing is determined by the composer, I want you to watch when we get to that scene how Colin Graham is, because the trouble is, singers often have so much to think about, they don't think about the words that they're saying and what they mean. You've got to think about your blocking. Okay, I stand here, and then I have to light the pipe, you know. And you have to think about your voice. Okay, it's getting a little raspy, let's support the diaphragm, open the throat, you know. Oh, and watch the conductor, and you know, all this, and remember what pitches and how to come in. That sometimes with the words, especially with singers that aren't that experienced, they could be reciting a laundry list or the white pages of the Richmond phone book, you know, it's just syllables. So it's the director's job to say, no, wait a minute, think about what you're saying. You just said blah, blah, blah. You know, well, would you say it like that? You can still do that within the context of an opera thing, so. Oh, wait a minute, sorry.
And just as he walked up the album, he said, singers.
It's a rough model.
Tennessee Williams's play, A Streetcar Named Desire, was first performed in New York in December 1947, and it starred Marlon Brando, Jessica Tandy, and Carl Malden. The multi-Oscar-winning movie was directed by Elia Kazan, as was the play, and had Vivien Leigh as Blanche, and this was made in 1951. Stella Dubois is married to Stanley Kowalski, a factory worker and a nighttime poker player. Their marriage is noisy but happy, and they live in a rundown quarter of New Orleans known as Elysian Fields, which happens to be on the route of the streetcar named Desire. Unexpectedly, they are landed upon by Stella's older sister Blanche, who is the chief protagonist of the story. It's in many ways autobiographical, both of Tennessee Williams himself and even, one could say, of some of its famous participants. Because at the time of the film, for instance, Vivien Leigh was herself in terrible emotional turmoil, and sometime later she eventually collapsed entirely and descended into madness.
You said you needed someone. Well, I needed someone too. I thanked God for you. You seemed gentle, cleft, and the rock of the world that I could hide in. I suppose I've been asking. I've been too much.
Blanche is at a terrible crossroads in her life. She's been fired, she's lost her home, she's been told to get out of town. So where does she go? She has to cling to her last straw, which is her sister Stella. Against all her better nature, she goes and does it. And she arrives at the Kowalski house, as somebody put it, knowing this is going to be the house of her death. And she goes into it, knowing it's going to be the end of her life, just as Williams went into it, thinking it was going to be the end of his life. And I think it's not just loneliness, it's a kind of desperate need for other people, for the strength of other people to keep you going.
first of all, it's difficult to come to grips with that good a play. I mean, it's one of the great, great American plays ever. So that's gauntlet number one. And then the other thing is, of course, that it has so many precedents. You know, I mean, it's been a successful stage production for the last, 50 years. It was an amazingly successful film. It had icon performances.
It's a world premiere. It's garnered quite a bit of attention. When one thinks of this piece, of course, they think of Marlon Brando and Vivian Leigh. That's kind of scary. You know, I'm used to being compared with opera singers. I've gotten used to that. I've thickened my skin to that, okay? You know, I know that I'll be compared in this way, perhaps, or not. But now suddenly it's Hollywood we're dealing with, or the theater. And naturally I'm nervous because that opens us up to a whole new possibility for criticism. You know, we're vulnerable people. I mean, we're on stage. If we weren't vulnerable, I don't think our performances would be terribly interesting. Oh, this buzzes right through me. It feels so good. Another. All right, let me do that again. I knew she was going to. Let me do it again. I can't believe this is going to be on film, our first day of rehearsal. This is going to be so humiliating when I see this. I'm going to be so humiliated. God.
No, well, they only take 10 seconds out of the 6 hours they record. Long as it's not that 10 seconds.
Yeah, maybe too. Well, we're kind of like you. Well, Mr. Gray is the high school superintendent. He suggested. Oh, this buzz is right through me. It feels so good. I know. Yeah, I guess, and boy, is it dirty. Holy mackerel. Gross. I've been drinking this? Never say a word about my appearance. You're fine. You're my Stella. You're a maid with 2 rooms. 2 rooms, did you say? Yes, this one.
Yeah, I think, you see, there's something about the upbringing that can't let you say, the bedroom where Stanley and I sleep. Because she doesn't know about Stanley, she doesn't know what kind of man Stanley is yet. And that bed means sex, everything else, the baby that's on the way. So, and we don't talk about that kind of thing in this kind of society. This one and the other one.
You liar, Stella. I think Blanche is a character that a lot of people can identify with. The coping that she does, with the drinking, with the boys, with her appearance. She's hanging on for dear life, and we sympathize with that, and we love her for that. She didn't get married at the right age, you know. She's only 30, you know, and it's too late for her, so obviously the culture's changed a little bit. And, you know, and she's just trying so hard, and I think that's why we care about her.
When she says, where's the drink, I need something, you should start to tell her where it is. And then when you see she's playing the game, just enjoy the game. Maybe that's better. But just watching is wrong. Now what happens just before the aria here? I have to tell Andre that I think the inflection is wrong on you haven't told him. Because you haven't told him, it's a relative. You haven't told him? I think it needs to be an upward inflection. We need to ask him.
Haven't told him.
You haven't told him? It needs to be a worried thing, not a, no, you haven't told him, you said a girl.
488 is just, there's been a very, very long scene with the two girls, with Blanche and Stella. And this is where Stanley comes in with all the poker playing cronies. And it just has to have a lot of energy and tension, you know. But it's not the...
One thing you need to understand about orchestral musicians, their lives, they go from rehearsal to performance to rehearsal to performance. They don't practice. They don't, it's, you know, it's different. Because they play so much music, they get very good at playing from sight. And so, during the course of a rehearsal like this, they're going to get, you know, they can get 80% of it just playing it from sight the first time. It's not like little students like your daughter when she took violin and she had to practice every day. They don't do that. And it's not because they're lazy, And the thing is, when it's really complicated contemporary music, you'll see they don't get it immediately here. They sound like maybe your daughter, and they need to go home and practice. And you're going to say, no, let's do it really slowly, you know. But that's why. You think, well, aren't they very good? No, it's just that this is when they learn it. They don't learn it at home.
Entrance of, I mean, it's a little villainous right now, which is probably my fault, but it should just be, yeah, and over here, that's much more important than the figure up on top. So why don't we take it a little easier and see if we can bring that off, because right now I think it's a bit much. Before we start, can I tell you, I mean, the playing is just wonderful. God, it sounds good.
You have to suck up to it also.
Okay, here we go. Now don't screw up. Okay. Okay. The rehearsal halls, as the rehearsal halls seem to be in most of the symphony halls of the world, are fairly lamentable. Luckily, the singers all know that. And they say, yes, we know it's going to be too loud, going to be too dry. So they all cope with it. One, that bar, 90, and 1. Try and kick off the G a little bit. Because it doesn't work. And of course it would be nice if sometime, as seems to be the habit in cities nowadays, to spend $857 million on a new whatever. How about putting up a rehearsal hall? It's just a bar, a very quick scherzo. You want it? 3 is fine. Okay, right. Fine.
We can try that.
And once more. Get it. And slowly. Yam badadim, dim bidadam badadim, bidadam badadam. Just the first. 5, 6. The thing of beauty. Okay, everybody, right there in 6.
Question? How does that relate to the bar before?
Not very well. It put the whole orchestra in for the first reading, without the singers, of course, into a room that you would have been hard-pressed to make a comfortable phone call in, much less rehearse, a huge orchestra. And so the sound was straight from hell. There was absolutely no bloom on anything, and I was despondent.
The point being that, watching an opera be put together, especially for the world premiere, is a little like watching sausage being made. Let's get the lights back on. Unfortunately, we don't have time for any more than that, but as I said, on February 28th at the Fine Arts Museum, you can see the entire documentary. It sort of follows him around during the period of time in which he was working on this opera. As for the music, the music should be as literary as the script is. And we've already said that's kind of the job of opera music. Keep in mind, this is his first opera. He never wrote opera before. The first operas by Mozart, Verdi, Puccini, Wagner, Bizet were all awful. But they lived in a time when things weren't on the internet and newspapers all over the world, and they were considered young composers, and well, it wasn't very good, but he's got potential, They were given more leeway, more time to develop. Now, they got a star composer to write his first opera, but opera is still difficult, So the pressure is on him. He can't afford to be as awful in his first opera as all the famous opera composers were in theirs. It's the same with Broadway musicals these days. They are so expensive, and the the backers put so much money into it that it's just a catastrophe if it fails, I said he's a great jazz musician, and he is one of our great masters of jazz. funny, they keep talking about he's an American composer. Actually, he's German. He's naturalized American. He was born in Germany to German parents, lived there till about the age of 8 or 9. Yeah, great American composer. Well, we're a melting pot. And New Orleans is the city of jazz, and you heard a lot of jazz in the film soundtrack. So this is a jazz opera, right?
Yeah.
You can't have a jazz opera because jazz, by nature, by definition, is improvisatory. You don't do it the same every time. That's the essence of jazz. And with an opera, you must do it, every note is chipped into stone. You have to do it the same way every time. It's classical music. But it can be jazzy. You can use the characteristic chords and procedures of jazz to make it sound jazzy. But this is not a jazz opera. Jazz is one of the tools, one of the devices that he employs when it has meaning. And in this opera, jazz sounds are used for one purpose, to depict one affect, one situation only, and it's a 3-letter word, and the first letter is S and the last letter is X. And I don't mean the alto sax. Jazz means sex, and in particular, the opera opens in the orchestral introduction with 2 bluesy sounding chords for the full orchestra. They sound like this. Those 2 chords have particular meaning. They stand for sexual dissolution and debauchery and slimy, shameful sex. In other words, Blanche's recent sexual history. Her sexuality. You will hear those 2 wah-wah chords, I don't know how many times, 11,150 times during the course of the opera. They are a symbol. The 2 chords stand for what? Sex. The 2 chords stand for sex. I predicted 25 minutes from now when I say, what did you hear there? What did it mean? You're going to go, you all forget. You always do. My students are very reliable. You all have short-term memory issues. And then, following that, in this orchestral introduction, you hear these, you want a nice tune. Da 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 da. Hey, oh, I like this opera. Instead, you're going to hear this weird instrumental clarinet line that it's not pretty. It wanders all over the place. It's kind of atonal. It's like, is the whole opera going to be like that? Listen to it. What's that about? Wandering. Well, consider, again, what we're doing is meeting Blanche musically before we ever see the character on the stage. It's sort of like, sometimes you hear dialogue in a play, and at the beginning of a play, and the dialogue, you can tell that this is when you came in on it, but the conversation has been going on before you heard where they were, you know what I mean? That you're coming in the middle of something. Well, I think this is following Blanche entering into New Orleans and summing her up. Blanche has been bouncing around she lost her home, she lost her high school job because she seduced 17-year-old boys in her English class, and she bounced to the outside of town to this seedy hotel where she was entertaining strange men every night, kicked out of town. She's on an odyssey, she's on a saga, trying to find a place to latch onto, so she wanders down to New Orleans. She's wandering aimlessly. Her mind is beginning to wander. So do you see how the purpose of that clarinet line was not to, oh, that was a lovely tune, I love this opera, but it was to give you information about Blanche. Doesn't that make sense? And it continues. Now, as this goes on, and I'll start from the beginning, a few seconds in, towards the end of the clip, you'll hear a solo trumpet line. It's very important, that trumpet line. That trumpet line, again, is Blanche. And what is the shape? If you were going to draw the contour of that trumpet solo on the chalkboard, on the dry erase board, what would the contour of it be? What would the shape be? Now, by the way, did that music sound tense? Did it sound neurotic? Did it make you, did it give you feelings of anxiety? And isn't it doing its job?
Yeah.
When you judge opera music, you cannot judge it by how it functions as ear candy for you. Like, oh, what's the name of that song? I can't wait to buy a recording of that. You have to judge it by how it's doing its job. It's a storytelling, dramatic tool. It's doing the job. It's doing the job. So, you know, don't hate on Brussels sprouts because they're not ice cream. Brussels sprouts have a different function. Appreciate Brussels sprouts for what they are, and don't hate on them for what they aren't. That's my advice about opera music. Now, that trumpet solo. Characterize that. What would be, if I was going to draw on the blackboard the shape of that line, what should it look like? Should it look like, should it look like this? No. How about
Yeah.
very good for a sales chart in your corporation for the third quarter. Not so good for a human mind. Erratic. Building, kind of spinning out of control. When I hear that, I think of, you know, a potter with a potter wheel making a vase with a clay, and he's not very good, he's inexperienced, and he starts losing control, and it splatters all over. You seen that? That's what, now, this is the vocal style for many of Blanche's lines. No other character ever has lines that go, I call it the zigzag line, the ascending zigzag. It represents Blanche's neurosis. Now, she doesn't always sing like that. If she's singing, honey, go down to the drugstore and get me a lemon Coke with chipped ice, that's something where she's in control of the situation. Remember when she said that to Stella in the scene? She was taking control of the situation. That's not when you're neurotic or anxious. That's her sort of rallying herself to take charge. So that'll be a different shape. But, for instance, her very first line, she thought that that Stanley and Stella would be living in the Garden District. Instead, they're in this scuzzy, awful, rat-infested bunch of, like a ghetto. And so she's been taking all this public transportation, and she's really confused, and so she's feeling really insecure and nervous. That would be a good time for the zigzag. So when she has this famous line, they told me to take a streetcar named Desire, what might we expect to hear? Let's see if it does that. Sorry, wrong one.
They told me to take a streetcar named Desire.
Did he do it? Yeah, he did it. And then Stella comes home, and there's this, you know, reunion of the two sisters, and they talk about this, and they talk about that. Stella innocently asks, so where are you planning to stay while you're in town? Well, she doesn't want to go to a hotel because she'll still be alone. she has to be around people, that she's come here to be around people. So she says, I'm not going to be put up at a hotel. That's anxiety and neurosis. So you get, after this, in the orchestra, listen to the line. The sordid story, the first of her secrets comes out. You know, this play is the process of peeling away, layer by layer, all of Blanche's lies and, secrets, until by the end we know it all. And pretty much everything she says in Act 1, Scene 1 was a lie. But she's talking about having lost Belle Reve. And Stella is dumbfounded to hear this. She's devastated. She's the breaking news. She didn't know it. Well, how could that happen? And so Blanche gets very defensive. Well, you left, you weren't around, you don't know what I went through. And she's talking about she had to watch her family die. Her father, her mother, somebody else named Margaret, another sister, I don't know, maybe it was their servant, I don't know. But they got a disgusting disease and they swelled up and they linger in death, and Blanche was there watching it, a little bit like Scarlett. Scarlett watching her father die of the dementia and so forth, and Scarlett going in the hospital and seeing all of the amputations and the horror of death. Again, a little nod to Gone with the Wind here. So here's the line about father and mother all so sick with it, or whatever she says. So one of the things that you can do so that you can put on your analytical ears when you go to see this opera is don't just, you're going to have to watch the super titles because, number one, a lot of these lines are not traditionally vocal lines. Andre Previn writes kind of instrumental lines. It sounded fine on the trumpet. It's not what we're accustomed to in a voice. They're kind of instrumentally conceived, which works against understanding the words. Plus, Blanche signs on a sol and accent, which doesn't help the understandability either. So you're really going to need to rely on looking at the screen for the words. But listen, don't just sort of listen, is it pretty? Listen for the zigzag line, or notice when that comes. You can do it. You can start to say, oh wait, I heard one. That wasn't even one he showed in class, but I heard it. And she was, I see what he's doing. That's one little step you can take towards analytical listening. Now, what else I got? How opera music can tell you what someone is thinking even when they aren't saying it. Usually that involves the orchestra. Now, before Stella shows up, Eunice, the upstairs neighbor, is making chit-chat. Oh, you're Stella's sister, hello, And she says, I've heard tell about where you come from. You live in a big, fancy home in Mississippi. Oh, yes, Belle Reve. And you'll hear when Blanche starts talking about Belle Reve, the music turns very lush and romantic. Because, of course, that's how, that's the image we have of that departed, wonderful, gracious life. And then, tell me what you hear in the orchestra after that, and tell me what the implication is of it. What would be the thought balloon over her head?
And you're from Mississippi, yes. I see the picture of your home, yes. A great big glass
romance. Then? What did you hear?
Dissonance.
What?
Dissonance.
What do you?
Yeah.
No. Short-term memory, people.
Sex. I didn't hear
What
sex.
did you heard? Wah, wah. Didn't we talk about the two chords?
That was a while
We talked
ago.
about the two chords. What's wrong with you? It was 10 minutes ago! I told you.
But we didn't hear it.
Yes, you did. It wasn't loud, but it was two chords. Bluesy, two bluesy chords. Listen again. Shh.
And you're from Mississippi, yes. I see the picture of your home place. But break me bless
Now. Wow. They're soft. Why are they soft, not loud like they were at the very beginning? Yeah. You see the relation? You hear the relation now. Why was it so soft? Because she's thinking. That's her thinking. And what is when she thinks of Belle Reve now, what does it mean to her? All the ugly, horrible stuff that got her chased. It's not her home anymore. And why? Because she turned into a sexual trollop and was asked to leave. Now, that's foreshadowing. See, that's foreshadowing because we don't even know that yet if we're coming to the story for the first time. That's a secret that's going to come out later. But there it is. Because that's what it's virtual reality. It's what she's thinking, whether you understand it yet or not. But if maybe there's a little assumed knowledge of the characters on the part of Andre Previn and his librettist, that you all know what she is, and see, this is the orchestra making commentary, giving you the subtext of, to the outside, you see those lush, romantic Hollywood chords for Belle Reve? That's what she's letting Eunice see. But then you and I, because we're like omniscient, we can be inside her head. We hear the sexual sleaziness of those chords. It makes sense, doesn't it? Come on. Yeah, okay. Now, Stella is going to get an aria. She is the seconda donna, the second soprano, not the prima donna, but she deserves an aria. There's a moment in Act 1 in the film where, tell me about Stanley, says Blanche. Oh, gosh, she says, I can't stand it when he's away. I cry like a baby, and I can't wait till he gets back, and when he gets back, I just climb into his lap, and we get the idea that she's very in love, but it's a really kind of it's a need more than, he's a great guy. She's just totally, Stella has left the Old South behind. She has moved on. No trace of the Southern Belle. She doesn't want what Red Butler called moonlight and magnolias. She just wants that body in her bed. So she gets, this is a pretty aria. It has a theme. Doody-doody-doo, those 5 notes. You'll hear very many times. Those 5, sing it with me. I'll sing it, then you sing it. Doody-doody-doo, go. Doody-doody-doo. That is the love theme. That little theme stands for, gosh, I'm in love with you, okay? What does duty do?
Love.
The love theme. How many notes?
5.
Doody-doody-doo.
What's sex? 2.
2 bluesy chords. Now, here's Stella's aria. It's pretty. It's not like the whole thing is going to be this cerebral, thorny, dissonant music. This is pretty. In fact, it's so pretty it made me think of something. I gotta find it now. put your fingers in your ears, that was so harsh and distant and ugly. Well, it was all right. It was pretty. So you don't have to be afraid of the opera. I can't stand modern music. Relax, relax. There will be ear candy. That was perfectly lovely. In fact, it was so lovely, I was thinking, what was Previn thinking of there? I know what he was thinking of. Just as Tennessee Williams put literary allusions in his script, I think Andre Previn has musical allusions to opera masters of the past. This one would be Puccini. Stella was just singing a little Puccini. In fact, she was saying from a particular Puccini opera, not plagiarism, but cut from the same cloth, Turandot. In fact, it was the character of Liu, the slave girl. Here is Liu's solo in Act 3 of Turandot, where she's telling the princess that I love the unknown prince and you too are going to fall in love with him. See if this doesn't sort of sound similar-ish. Basic similarity in the writing for the voice and the sort of the harmonic, but there were some very close harmonies that were, very close to each other there. So I think it's deliberate. Another one, when Stanley, the first scene is Stella and Blanche, and it's all kind of girly, love and bell reef and so forth. When Stanley comes in, it's got to sound masculine, And so the orchestral introduction has to sort of scream that at us. And there is a guy, an American composer that I think Previn is using in mind as a doff of the cap, who wrote the most masculine music. He wrote Rodeo and Billy the Kid, Aaron Copland. And I believe that here's about 15 seconds of music to introduce Stanley in the orchestra. That beef commercial where beef, it's what's for dinner, and the music that was in the background, you'll hear when it sounds a little bit like that. That's Aaron Copland-ish, very much. And why? Again, why does the music sound the way it sounds? To give us all that testosterone of Stanley making his entrance. Now, some scenes that you saw in that first clip, that first confrontation. We said that Blanche is trying to tame this cowboy with all the feminine wiles and sexuality at her disposal. Remember that I pointed out that line about he couldn't button her buttons, and she said, "Oh, you men with your big fingers." Again, Andre Previn is understanding what's going on, so tell me what you hear in the orchestra when she delivers that line. Sorry. Where is it? It pleases me that you burst out laughing, because now you understand the subtext. This is just to let you, because, a lot of people will see this and not think that when she says big hands, she means it in a sexual way. And in case you don't get it, the orchestra is cluing you into that. Unfortunately, 90% of the audience won't get that, And they'll just think, I don't like modern music. Too bad. Stanley doesn't get an aria. Everybody, Blanche gets several arias, Stella gets hers, Mitch gets an aria, not Stanley.
Why?
Why? Why do opera, we're going to have to continue this next week for about 20 minutes before we head into Mozart land. But, new person, what's your name?
Jennifer.
Jennifer. Jennifer, you and I are going to improvise a scene of dialogue right now, because in opera, you use dialogue to advance the plot, to give us action, to give us the next development when the plot thickens. And then arias are where the characters are left alone on stage and they let us into what they're thinking about, how they feel emotionally about what just happened. So Jennifer, just go with me, just say what you think you would probably say if this was really true, you know. First of all, stand up, would you? I need you to stand up. Jennifer, there you are, I've been looking for you. Jennifer, I have terrible news.
Oh, what is it?
You'd better sit down. Jennifer, I wish I wasn't the one to tell you. I want you to try to remain calm, okay?
Please tell me.
A little while ago, your hamster Timmy broke out of his cage and he ran out in the street. And oh, Jennifer, he was run over by a garbage truck.
Oh, heavens to Betsy.
And I leave, and now Jennifer is going to sing an aria. My heart is broken in two. What will I do without Timmy? You know, and all this, right? In order to be able to sing an aria, you must be a person who has an emotional life, who is in touch with your emotions, and who is contemplative and reflective by nature, who stops and says, how do I feel, you know?
That's not Stanley.
Stanley never does that. No. Stanley is a narcissist and a sociopath. He has one emotional state, which is...
Anger.
No, anger. Yeah, well, anger. Anger. That's like all, this is so true to life with psychology. Narcissists and especially sociopaths, the only authentic emotion they feel is anger. So Stanley and his vocabulary, his stuff is like, I'm gonna have a lawyer look at that. Bring me a beer. You look okay. Now let me tell you something. You know, he doesn't have poetic language, so he can't have an aria. Therefore, it is really important that when Stanley sings, you be able to understand every word. You won't need the super titles, hopefully, if everybody's doing their job. For instance, here's where he's telling, remember about the Napoleonic Code? Here's where he's talking to Stella about that. You should get every word.
Let me enlighten you on a point or two. In the state of Louisiana, we have what is known as the Napoleonic Code. What that means is what belongs to you belongs to me, and vice versa. Looks to me like you've been swindled, baby, and when you get swindled, seems to me like I get swindled too.
Every word, every syllable. Because all he has is dialogue, therefore it's important that it be declaimed, not sung, but it's actually like what those guys who invented opera in 1597 in Florence were trying to do. Those operas, if you listen to them, we don't do them much because they don't have pretty songs. It's all sort of declamatory in Italian. What they were aiming for was a form of heightened speech, larger-than-life speech. And in that sense, that's sort of like what Stanley's stuff is. Now I'm going to play you one more if you'll give me a couple minutes. I want you to listen. You know, she keeps asking Stanley during that scene, you know, I was once considered attractive. Don't you think I'm still pretty? And he never falls for it. He just says, you're all right. You know. And now she's going to say, I was fishing for a compliment. Stanley, I was fishing for a compliment. Before I let you go, listen to that line, tell me what you notice, and tell me why that vocal style is employed right there. fishing for a compliment. What is that? That's the zigzag. That was the zigzag. She doesn't always do the zigzag. Why there?
She's out of control.
She's lost her looks, and he's not responding. He's not doing what all the boys in Mississippi. Oh, you look like a dream, Miss Blanche. You're just as lovely as a drop of moonlight. You know, you're all right. And she really feels that she's, in that clip, that soliloquy you saw in the documentary, she said, I am fading. She knows that she's too old, she's screwed up, she's not pretty anymore. This is one of the things that she's so neurotic and anxious about. So when she says, I was fishing, it's giving a subtext to it. It's not like, oh, I was fishing for a compliment, you big nitty. It's like, I was fishing for a compliment, aren't I? I'm not pretty, am I? Oh, you know. The vocal contour gives you that subtext. The zigzag. Her life is spinning out of control. We'll finish the music in about 20 minutes next week, and then on to my second favorite opera of all.